Divinity 2 Original Sin introduces its players to its digital world by starting them out in a tutorial space, where players are introduced both implicitly and explicitly to the controls, interactions, overarching narrative, and expectations of the game. Before diving into the tutorial area, however, the player has a chance to make their character, either selecting from the origin cast, or letting their creativity flow with custom options. I decided to create my own character. However, I applaud the developers for allowing players to dive into the game without fussing around in nitty-gritty details and still have an enjoyable, and some fans would argue enhanced, experience in the game. Origin characters have developed backstories, personalities, and objectives, which makes it easy for players who are new to RPGs to get into the game without sacrificing playability. Even if you decide to make a character from scratch, you'll still have an opportunity to add members of the Origin cast to your party and play as them later. Heading into the tutorial, I noticed a couple of ways Divinity incorporates learning and gameplay. For example, players are required to search for a key to unlock a door early on in the level. At a later time, however, the player reaches a door which is locked, but has no key. In this instance, the player is challenged to find a different way through the door, illustrating that there can be multiple solutions to a problem. The answer to this puzzle is to pay mind to the durability of the door, which is incredibly low, and attack it to bring it down. Another example of the game showing players the ropes is in the prison scene, which tackles a number of core gameplay mechanics, namely, dialogue and combat. Dialogue impacts the story, and can lead to dangerous situations if you're not careful with your choices. In my playthrough, I failed a persuasion check with the guard, which led to a bit of a bloodbath. However, this taught me a valuable lesson about playing to my character's strengths and paying attention to what skills I want to upgrade in the future. The response to Divinity 2 on Steam is overwhelmingly positive, with nearly 100,000 reviews since its release in September of 2017. Many big game review companies have ranked the game above 90%, and players consider the game a top-tier isometric RPG, according to CBR. Lovers of Dungeons & Dragons are sure to enjoy this virtual edition. Compared to the first Divinity, Divinity 2 is considered to have a greater emphasis on character depth and development, and be more polished overall. While I was learning how to play, I found that Divinity goes by the method of show, don't tell, meaning most instances of learning happen by doing something new, promoting curiosity and encouraging creative thought. Similar to other games in its genre, Divinity includes behavioral reinforcement systems such as the loot collection system, which rewards exploration, combat success, and thoughtful dialogue choices. In Divinity 2, there's a separate reward system and punishment system, based on player learning. As you progress through the game, combat will be more punishing if you don't use the strategy you've learned in earlier fights. Additionally, being successful in fights and learning to interact with the environment in creative ways is rewarded with better loot and newly unlocked areas in greater abundance. Like most games, refusing to learn how to play correctly results in not being able to progress easily or at all. Another way the game evaluates player learning is through the XP system, which can be gained through discovering areas and completing objectives. Upon leveling up, the player receives a number of different skill points. Similar to Dungeons & Dragons, you have stats, or ability scores, which increase, but you also get an option to choose a class-based skill, which will allow you to use new spells and abilities. In my playthrough, I felt inclined to upgrade my thievery skill in order to use a lockpick I'd found earlier. While there's a limit to the amount of XP you can earn in Divinity, this only reinforces the idea that players should be picking skills they feel will fit together. This limited XP system isn't punishing, however. There's a magic mirror which lets you reallocate skill points as well as other characteristics and try something new as many times as you want. While I couldn't see Divinity 2 being used in a K-12 classroom, I think it has some unique learning objectives for its players. Rather than teaching hard skills like mathematics or history, Divinity reinforces a variety of soft skills such as teamwork, planning, and communication. In fights, for example, strategy for success involves diversity, not spreading yourself too thin, and knowing when combat situations are appropriate to tackle. I think these tools are transferable to the real world, just not directly, or at least hopefully not. Divinity uses fantasy elements to start a discussion about societal inequality by dividing people into two categories, sorcerers and magisters. Magisters believe the source, which is the source of all magic in the world, is a dark and chaotic force, and those who use it must be imprisoned, killed, or otherwise mistreated. As a sorcerer yourself, you're directly involved in this conflict, and often must make decisions based on it. While the division sounds simple, playing the game reveals true intentions and deepens the story, drawing parallels between the fantasy world and our own. On an individual level, Divinity allows players to explore roleplay the way all good RPGs do. Throughout the game, the player character's background is reinforced by giving them access to dialogue choices specific to their social role, such as soldier, noble, and mystic, for example, and race, like elf, human, and undead. For me, this really helped me embrace the character and their motives, separating them from myself in a creative and exciting way. Roleplaying can be a very effective learning tool, and the way it was tackled by Divinity makes the game immersive and enjoyable. Player feedback suggests that Larian Studios did a great job of making this Dungeons & Dragons style video game. Based on my limited playtime alone, I think the Divinity 2 development team accomplished what they set out to do. The game encourages and rewards exploration, it reinforces character development, and it sets definitive world rules that are interesting and can be easily understood by players. All of these aspects are akin to traditional D&D, so I'd consider their work successful in this regard. Overall, I would consider Divinity 2 an instructionally sound game that leaves little room for improvement. I enjoyed figuring out how to strategize in combat, experimenting with dialogue options, and being consistently curious about the world around me. As a game designer, there's a lot to learn from the behavioral reinforcement systems and learning mechanisms of Divinity 2.